So step one, we're going to start adding a location to our task by on the task screen or on the add task screen when you're about to add a task, you can tap a button that says add a location to this task if you'd like. And then that will take you to a map view where you can enter an address and then look for a specific location that you want to add, and then that will return that location back to the add task screen where it will then be ready to attach to the task. And then next class we're going to save that in the database and then actually use that as we get more location aware on the device. So the steps we need to go through are we need to add a new button, and then we will use a new method on an activity called start activity for result, and I will explain that a little bit more as we get into the code, but basically the idea is that we're going to start an activity expecting a result to be returned instead of, as we've done in the past, just starting an activity so that it runs, and we don't really care what happens in there. We just come back whenever it finishes. In this case, we want to finish and have a result returned to us, and that result is going to be what's called an address, which we will then make ready to attach to the task. So this is the flow. You start the activity for the result, and then the activity runs. You do some things, some interesting things, and then when the activity is done, it will call back to on activity result in the calling activity, which will be the add task activity, and then that will have the result available on the intent that you can grab off the intent and then use it, and the result again will be an address in this case. And we're not actually going to build the map screen just yet, but I'm showing it for the purpose of understanding what the flow is going to be like. So let's get into the code, and I'm going to start with the project that we left off with last week. And we're going to start by building the changes to the add task screen, which again in the emulator looks like this. So we're going to add a button here that says add location to task, and when we click it we'll go to a new activity. Ooh, look at this, an error has occurred. I get that a lot inside of the visual editor for editing XML layout files. That's one reason why I don't use it that much. So I'm going to switch over to the XML view, which doesn't give me errors quite so often, and when it does give me errors, they're probably my fault. The first thing that we need to do is add a button. So I'm going to put that, remember we're using a linear layout, so everything is just going to be laid out top to bottom. Text view, edit text, and right underneath the edit text I want to add a button, which is going to be the one that we'll click to add a location. So I'm going to paste in some code to save typing. I want the ID to be add location button, fill parent, wrap content, just like the other buttons, and then the text should say something like add location to task. So I can use our refactoring feature to say what I want the title to be. Then I can select it and say refactor extract Android string, and that will be exactly what I want. So now I should have a button on the screen. To make it actually work, we need to add a click listener. So actually, I think in the code, I've meant to do this at some point. I'm just going to do it now. I'm going to show you a different way to do a click listener, and this will not be in the sample code that I uploaded to that's available through the O'Reilly zip file that you get if you buy the course, or through my GitHub project. But just on a whim today, since I'm feeling experimentative, I'm going to show you a different way to do click listeners, which is a little bit less verbose. So on the add task activity, what we're going to do is add a function that you will call from this button, and you can declare which function you want to call right on the button instead of setting up a click listener on the button inside the activity, which is a little more verbose because you have to do the whole create an anonymous class and all that kind of stuff, a view on click listener, and then implement a a certain method. But what you can do instead, and this is a new feature in 1.6, I believe, is you can say Android on click inside the XML, which is pretty cool. And then you need to say the name of a function, and we'll call this function add location button clicked. And that's all you need to do inside the XML. Now inside the activity, I'm going to open up source, O'Reilly Android Task Manager, add task activity. And what I need to do, not sure why this guy keeps popping up. What I need to do is add a method called add location button clicked, and it needs to accept a view. And I think it needs to be public. Public void add location button clicked that takes one argument and of the type view. And now this button will be clicked when, or this function will be called when the button is clicked. And that saves a whole lot of typing and a lot of weird on-click listener stuff like this. Although it does, the one drawback is that it does make it a little less clear what's actually going on, because here I'm saying like this button, when you click it, this is what I want to happen. So it's very, very clear that I'm associating the button with the function. To alleviate that just a little bit, I've used a naming convention, which makes sense when you read it. Add location button clicked, that means that I expect the add location button to call this function or this method. So in any case, that will save us a little bit of typing, and that's something that you can use. And what I want to happen then, and let me paste in the code from my sample code, which you will have access to, and there will be something slightly different. So let me get to that in a second after I import these things. It's not giving me the option to import for some reason. So let me go up here. I think it is import Android .content, I think, .intent, is that right?
Android.content.intent?
Yeah, and I'm not sure why Eclipse wasn't finding that. I was just worried for a second that something was really wrong with my environment. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with my environment. It just, maybe the errors were such that it was just not looking in the class path yet, and it was complaining about other errors first. Anyhow, intent, we've seen that many times before, so kind of know how that looks. So now that I have intent imported, I can talk about what comes next. So remember, we have to kind of jump through this weird, sort of red tape to get the actually what this we mean to refer to when we use a click listener, like something like here, or well, in other examples we've seen where you have to refer to this. If I go through this method of actually having declaring the method that I want to call from the XML, then I don't have to do that anymore, and it's just like you're probably used to. We can just refer to this as the context or the activity as the first argument to the intent. So what the intent I want to be doing here is opening up a new activity called add location map activity, and so I've declared that here, and then I'll go through and create it in just a second. And then instead of calling start activity, which we've done a few times in the past to start a new activity, I need to call start activity for result. And then what I'm going to do is pass in the intent just like you would for start activity. But then I want to have a constant request choose address that will be something that will mark the type of intent that will be sent back from the previous from the class that I called out to, or from the activity that I called out to, the map activity in this case, which will call back with onActivity result. And then when the intent comes back to a special method that we'll implement here in a second, it will come back with this type of request, this constant in the method signature, so I know, or the arguments to the method, so I'll know what activity is coming back, and then I can choose based on this constant what I want to do based on what activity is coming back. That way I can call it to multiple activities, have them do some work, and give me back the results of whatever work they did. So we'll look at that in just a second. We're going to see this a couple different times, this different parts of this process. So hopefully by the end we'll see how that all comes together. But if you have any questions, start thinking about them now and then see if I answer them along the way. So first of all, I'm going to implement this constant right here. So I'm going to create a constant called request choose address. And that needs to be of type int. So if I tab up here, you can see I've got the box surrounding it because I use the Eclipse generation method. And then I can choose things about it. Private static final is fine. Request choose address 0 is fine. All we need to do is make sure that's a unique integer so that we know the different request types that we have. Outgoing and incoming. Now I can click on this. There's this little gutter over here on the side, as you can see where my mouse pointer is, that shows me errors in the project, and I can click on this and jump down to the error, which is this activity that doesn't yet exist that we need to create. So now we'll go create that activity. We'll just have a simple activity so that we can see that things are running, and then in the next step we'll be implementing the view there. So I'm going to create a class, add location map activity, clicking there. I want this to be of type activity. Some reason I'm not getting code completion in there, so I can browse for that. Superclass selection. Yeah, it seems like there's something wrong with my environment. I'm not sure why this happens, but it's not looking for any of the Android classes. So I'm just going to have to fix that in the code. Eclipse isn't helping me out here. I'll just leave this as a placeholder because I can't find it. So I'll click finish, and then it will create the class for me. And this properties thing keeps popping up. I'm not sure why. Okay, so sometimes Eclipse can really annoy you, but that's surmountable. So an activity, as I go back to add task activity, and I just need to figure out what class that's in, or what package that's in. I can hit F3 on this task manager activity because that should import activity, and it's android.app.activity. So I can copy that, close this, and come here and replace this faulty import with the correct one, and now everything should be fine. And we'll change this in a little bit to map activity, but for right now, activity is good enough. So okay, so now we have an activity that is capable of taking an intent and being started by the Android framework. So that's something we can call out to when this button is clicked. But there's one other step that I need. Of course, can anybody remember what I need to do if I'm going to start a new activity with an intent so that things don't crash?
I've got some guesses here. Update the manifest?
That's right. So I need to go to the manifest. By the way, in this open resource pane, which we've used a couple times, again on Mac that's Command-Shift-R, on Windows I think it's Option or Alt-Shift-R for open resource, which will open resources in your project. You can use stars and question marks and things from like pattern matching expressions to help search for things. So I can search for star M and I'll find things that start with a capital M or have a capital M somewhere in them, and manifest is one of those. So I can double click that, open the manifest. I get this editor here, but I'd rather go edit the XML. And then underneath the add task activity, I'll add another activity, add location map activity, and the text should be add location to task, and that'll show up in the title. So now this is all ready to run. Why don't we just do a quick smoke test to make sure that my button shows up and is clickable and goes to the right activity. Add task. Now I have add location to task. I can click it and it goes to this other activity, which doesn't have a view yet, so it doesn't show anything. And I can go back. Okay, so that's the flow that we want. But there's one more piece that we need to set up inside add task activity, which is the callback piece. So now we're setting up this intent to call out to the new activity, the map activity, and we want it to come back with the result. And when it comes back with the result, it will pass back in this constant, this request choose address, where we want to check to see if this is the result that is coming back is in a special method on add task activity that is called on activity result. That means that method will be called whenever an activity that we start with start activity for result finishes and comes back and gives us our result. So I'm going to paste in the code that we want here underneath on create and then talk through it. So the method name is onActivityResult, and that will be overridden from activity, and it takes 3 arguments: request code, result code, and then it passes back the intent that started everything off, which is where we put data that we want to pass around between the activities. So intents are not just for starting off other activities, they're also for holding data that can be information that's useful between the 2 activities. So sharing data between runs of an activity. And what I do here is I check if request choose address, remember that's the constant that we just implemented up here, is the request code. So that means this activity is going to finish and send back the request code that started it. And if it's request choose address and the result is okay, that's one of I think 2 different types of results that an activity can finish with, and I'll show you how that works in a second. But you can either say everything's fine and I'll send back this code as the result, or I think you can say canceled is another one, and I'll look at that in a second. How we implement that on the other side of the equation, the other add location map activity. So basically, I mean, this is nice. It kind of reads like English. If the request was choose address and the result is okay, then we want to get the address off of the intent, which is in this local variable data. And the way we get that out is there's this concept of extras on an intent. Extras are where you store data that you want to pass between activities on an intent. And there are a couple different types of extras that you can add. First of all the Java primitives can be added. Strings can be added. And then if you have more custom data, you can do one of 2 things. You can either make it, just simply mark it serializable, which is a Java interface that you can implement that doesn't have any requirements on methods that you need to implement. And then you can pass serializable objects on intents between activities. Or Android also has this concept of making a class parcelable, which is an interface that you need to implement, and then you need to do a little work in there. With this, we're not going to go through that in this class, but a lot of the Android or the objects that you'll use that are part of the framework that you would end up passing between intents, like for instance an address, are already made parcelable, so they're ready to go. So what we need to do is get this parcelable extra out of the intent, and it's going to be of type add location, the key. So this is like a key value pair type of a situation. So the key will be this constant that we'll set up on add location map activity called address result, and that will be a key that will point to the address that we need to grab off of the intent. So let's just create that constant really quick. And that needs to be a string, and we'll just call it something like address. It just needs to be a unique string, so that when we finish this activity, we'll put the address that we grabbed from the user's activity onto the intent with this key, and then as it returns to the calling activity, add task activity, we'll be able to grab it off using that same key, and then everything will be kosher, and we'll understand without having to maintain bare strings to get those keys out, what the key name should be. And then finally I want to put this on a field so that I can use it once everything is all ready and this activity is returned, and now I have an address. So I'm going to just say create field here, which should be of type parcelable, but we want that to be instead of type address. Yep, and I get no completion. I'll have to look into that later. So I can end up just copying that in. So what we want that type to be is of android.location.address. And we can get rid of this unused parsable import. And now that is the skeleton that we need in place for that round trip between these two activities. So once again, that's going to look like kick off this activity by adding location to task, then we'll start the map activity, and when it returns, we will get the result of an address on activity result. So are there any questions? We didn't really see any of that working, but we set the framework in place so that we can get it working the next time around. Are there any questions about what we've looked at just in that, just setting up the framework?
Yeah. I have a couple of questions. One is the on-click function that you added in XML. Is that something that's just in 2.1? Is it also available in 1.6? Is it backwards compatible with older versions?
Well, yeah, it's available in 1.6. Yeah, but it should still run, I believe. It's a good question to see because that's something that should be compiled, right? It's not interpreting XML on the fly on the device, so I think that should run on older versions. That's a good something to check into. But compiling it won't work on older versions of the SDK. That's for sure. You won't understand that.
And sort of related to that is there a best practice to use one or the other, the interclass versus setting it up in the XML?
Yeah, I don't know. My team has just chosen to do it that way because we're kind of familiar with it, and there's less typing, and also another thing. This came up in forum conversations. Creating an extra object by creating that anonymous class is, you're actually creating that object. So this way, and creating objects is bad. It takes up memory, it takes up time. There could be performance implications the more objects that you create. This way, the SDK or the framework, may still be creating objects, but at least that's an optimization point that you can hand off to Android to do the right way. And if they have some better way to optimize things such that they don't have to, go through the same steps that you would have to, that's something that may be a benefit too. So I don't know. I don't know if I wouldn't call it a best practice, but I think that you wouldn't go wrong doing it this way. It's just that you have to be, cognizant of the fact that naming conventions is probably the best practice there. So you need to use good naming conventions so everybody knows what components are going to be calling which functions.
Okay. All right. And then one more quick question from my end. The onActivity result method, that's a method, an override method. Is that overriding the method in activity?
Yes. So you can see that, and this is another good thing to call out, I guess. Thanks for reminding me. If it doesn't happen to be the case that I know that they're choosing an address and that everything is okay, then I want to make sure that I let the super onActivity result have its say in the execution. So I don't just want to make this a black hole, and if it's not what I want, then forget about it. I need to pass it up the chain too, so everything works the way that the framework expects.
All right. And Sarah, Ruth, do you have any additional questions, or are we ready to move on?
There are a couple of brief questions about onClick. Someone asked, there's no need to use the class name and onClick clause in the XML, and I'm assuming that's answered by the internal class versus class in XML answer that you give. And the other one is, someone is not finding onClick available in 1.6. That doesn't seem right to me, but I thought I'd post that because I'm not on 1.6 right now.
Interesting. I didn't think that was added in 2.0. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it was added in 2.0. If that's the case, then you'll have to just use the other click listeners.
Henning says that it is in 1.6, and he's got a link, he or she, and I'm going to pop that into the chat room for changes in Android 1.6.
So it might just be an error in that one person's setup.
And does Android automatically do garbage collection on the anonymous object when it is not needed?
Yeah, garbage collection works, but garbage collection is also a performance hit. So, you don't fill up the trash too much, because then there's a lot of trash to take out. But again, I mean, this SDK, or the SDK may be creating code that does the same thing. It's just that you can let some smart engineer at Google fix your problems for you, and make things a little more optimal if you do it this way by adding the onClick instead. So whoever had the problem with the onClick not working on 1.6, I'm not sure what actual problem they were having. Was it just that were they getting an error when they tried to do the onClick, or were they not getting code completion?
I'm not getting any response back to a couple of questions posted or to this conversation. So somebody posted the link already to the changes in the framework, and I think we can just move on from there.
Okay.
Just seem to be having a momentary issue.
Yeah, well, so am I with with my Eclipse setup, so that'll happen. You can take that to the forums.
Yeah. Before you go on to the next segment, we have one question from the audience, and then we'll go on.
Okay.
This on-click feature, can you only call to the activity you're within, or is there some extended version to get anywhere else? I don't know.
Call to
I'm not
another
sure where
activity?
I want to go, but
yeah, I think it would. Well, I don't know. It would be pretty. It would be. Maybe it might be nice to be able to call something on the application, which you could count on being there. But I would be scared to call something on another activity that would really couple this view to another activity that, the modular approach would be best. And no matter if you could or couldn't, the modular approach would be best. Where I'm basically what's weird here, and you need to use the naming conventions and understand what's going on. But I'm kind of like specifying an interface that any activity that uses this view needs to conform to, which is a little strange because that's the weirdest part of this thing. But yeah, specifying an interface that other activities need to conform to, or the fact that they need to be running, would also be a little weird, even weirder. So I think that you can rest easy if you just make sure that this is a method that's on the activity that's using this view.